From the castle in Owings Mills, it is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer live on a Thursday in October to discuss much. We have a lot to discuss here, Jonas. We are going to run through the new members of the Ravens defense, Alohi Gilman, Gardner-Johnson. How much will they play on Sunday? We're going to preview that game against the LA Rams. Also going to talk about how this defense could possibly survive without one of their pass rushers in Odafe Oweh, and an all-important game as they head into the bye. All that and much, much more. But first, a quick word from our sponsors.
For the fifth year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
Looking for the ultimate game day spot? Head to Guinness, Baltimore. We've got fresh pints, the biggest screen south of the stadium, and the perfect place to cheer on the home team. Game time is Guinness time. All right, Jonas, it's a beautiful day here at the castle. We are after the viewing period of practice, so we have witnessed the very beginning stages of practice, and as such, we have some injury updates. Some positive injury updates. Jonas, we saw the return today of cornerback Marlon Humphrey as well as fullback Patrick Ricard. Now, we haven't got the injury report, so we don't know what capacity they practiced in. We would assume limited because this would be their first practice back. And for Ricard, this would be his first practice back in literally months. But at least we got a little bit of positive news on the injury front.
Glimmers of hope.
It's the hope that kills you.
I don't think either's going to be playing this weekend, just based on the fact that Marlon wasn't able to do pass rushing drills, which don't require a whole lot of athletic oomph. And then obviously, just thinking about Pat and what John Harbaugh said about him on Monday, just the expectation for him was that he would be hopefully ready by the game after the bye against the Bears. Obviously, maybe him being ready to go today is a sign that he's further ahead of schedule than initially thought, but I just think that with how careful you have to be with calves because of how correlated they are to Achilles injuries, and you can't risk this guy missing any more time, it seems pretty likely that especially Pat is pretty unlikely to play on Sunday, which is obviously a huge bummer for a Ravens offense that has needed him, will need him. But he's a 300-pound guy who you have to kind of handle with gloves at this point because of just everything he does athletically. So good sign for the Ravens, but I just don't know how consequential either of those injuries will be as it pertains to Sunday's game.
Yeah, there are a few more injury updates that we should run through after we got the injury report yesterday on Wednesday. Still no Lamar Jackson. That is obviously the elephant in the room. He is not practiced on Wednesday, did not practice on Thursday. Seems very unlikely that he would come back and make his return against the LA Rams on Sunday. So the ball is going to be once again in the hands of Cooper Rush. Kyle Hamilton returned to practice this week, listed with his groin injury as limited, returned yesterday after missing last week, Thursday, Friday, and then, of course, the game on Sunday. Ronnie Stanley, who missed Sunday's game against the Texans as well with his ankle injury, limited yesterday. Devontae Walker dealing with an oblique. He popped up on the injury report last week, but played in Sunday's game. He's listed as limited. Roger Rosengarten, right tackle, dealing with a knee injury. He's listed as limited on Wednesday as well. And then a new bombshell has entered the villa, Jonas. Zay Flowers, listed on Wednesday's injury report with a shoulder injury and was limited at practice. He did talk after practice, though, and seemed fine. We didn't know the injury report at that point. We just saw him out there, so didn't really have an idea of what he was dealing with. We also saw Joseph Noteboom added to the injury report with an ankle injury as limited. Roquan Smith still not out there. Chidobe Awuzie still not out there. And then Ben Cleveland, another addition to the injury report, listed or not out there today, which means who knows whether he will be playing on Sunday or available on Sunday, I should say. And then finally, Emory Jones Jr., rookie tackle, full participant in practice on Wednesday for the first time as a member of the practice team. Not the practice squad, but a member of the team. Jonas, did I miss any?
Nope.
Think that's all the injury report, right? Okay. Let's talk about the defense, shall we? Because this is a defense that just shook up their personnel, just added a couple safeties, one to the practice squad and one to the 53-man roster. Of course, the 53-man roster edition, Alohi Gilman wearing number 12. You'll see him out there on Sunday. This is a bit of a homecoming for Alohi Gilman. Gianna Hahn of The Banner wrote a great story that you can read, subscribe $1 for 6 months, about how this is a return to Maryland. Somebody who played at Navy before he transferred to Notre Dame, and while he was at Notre Dame, played with Kyle Hamilton. He was a senior when Kyle Hamilton was a freshman. He joked that Kyle Hamilton wanted to quit and turned himself into an NFL All-Pro, got himself in shape, and became a first-round pick, and obviously went on to bigger and greater things. Alohi Gilman, pretty impressive when we talked to him, and somebody who is coming from a Chargers system that obviously has ties to the Ravens. They all come from this Chargers, Ravens, Michigan Venn diagram. And Jesse Minter, who's the defensive coordinator over there in LA, used a lot of Ravens film, he said, to break down how their defense was going to run.
And not only that, but he has some familiarity with the Rams too, because they've had some open practices against LA, and obviously Sean McVay is always going to have some trick up his sleeve. So whether you're prepared for them, whether you've practiced against them, it's always going to be a new challenge, just because of how McVay and that Rams offense is able to put guys in conflict. But considering just how whirlwind of a week this has been for him, he was talking yesterday about how he slept for maybe 3 of the past 24 hours upon his arrival to Baltimore. Upon talking to us, he's got a young daughter, I believe. I think he has a young son on the way. Obviously, having to uproot his family. He's going to probably be asked to do a lot. I don't think that he's going to take Malachi Starks' job as a starter, but it doesn't really matter if the Ravens are embracing more 3 safety sets, which is obviously something that they used to great effect in 2023. Less so last year. Were able to steer things around when they kicked Marcus Williams and Eddie Jackson out of the lineup. But I think it's realistic for him to have a relatively big share of snaps on Sunday. I think you just hope that with his reputation as a communicator, that's something that has stuck out to me from looking at old quotes, players talking about him, coaches about him. He's just a guy who helps guys get put in the right spots, and Lord knows the Ravens need some more of those. So it's going to be interesting to see just how much he plays, what role he plays. I think it's probably going to be, a lot of too high, just the kind of, putting a shell on that Rams offense, trying to make them earn their way down the field, which against the Ravens doesn't require a lot of great shakes. But I just think that they're going to probably try to not overburden him, but also ask him to play a lot, because if they want Kyle Hamilton to play as much in the slot as we think that they do, then you're going to need another backfield partner with Malachi Starks.
It is interesting how last year the Ravens ditched Eddie Jackson and ditched kind of that 3 safety look in a way to fix their defense. And this year, it seems like they are trying to reinstill the 3 safety look in order to save the defense, which again, they need at this point in the season. How much would you expect if everybody's healthy, assuming Kyle Hamilton returns to the field? You got Malachi Starks still out there, and you now have Alohi Gilman. How much would you expect to see a 3 safety look out there with Kyle Hamilton probably playing closer to the line of scrimmage?
It's a good question. The heavier personnel, with 2 backs or 12 with 2 tight ends. And so, the Ravens have been a little bit more willing this year to meet those heavier personnel with base personnel, which means just 4 DBs on the field. So just 2 safeties, 2 outside cornerbacks. But if they want to get all 3 of those guys, and that means that they're probably going to have to take a chance at their run defense, which is already a problem. It's going to be a little bit less secure. So I think maybe we'll see Alohi playing 80% of the snaps on Sunday. It could be that they want bigger people on the field to match up with the physicality of this Rams team in between the tackles. But I just think that you don't trade for a guy like Alohi before a game like this if you're not going to throw him out there for at least 60, 70% of the snaps.
Right. And if communication is his big thing, that's great. But it would have been more ideal if he was here throughout training camp and here throughout the preseason, because he can communicate only so well about a defense that he just is starting to learn on Tuesday for a game on Sunday. So we'll see how his addition impacts the Ravens defense. And then somebody who is probably less likely to make contributions, that's the practice squad signing of CJ Gardner-Johnson, wearing number 6 if you see him out there on Sunday. what a cast of characters now the Ravens have in this secondary. Obviously, Kyle Hamilton is about as straight-laced and professional as it comes. And then you've got a group of loud talkers, I'd say, and we could hear some of it in the locker room in CJ Gardner-Johnson, Marlon Humphrey, obviously, as well as Jair Alexander. So just an interesting group of characters here. But Jonas, we kind of talked a little bit in our last podcast when we broke down the trade and the addition of CJ Gardner-Johnson about the circumstances that led to CJ Gardner-Johnson being cut by the Texans. But really, this is something that has kind of plagued him, or at least followed him throughout his career, going all the way back to when he was a member of the New Orleans Saints. I knew that he got in this incident. I had forgotten who he got in this incident with. And that was when Anthony Miller punched CJ Gardner-Johnson in the face in the middle of a playoff game and got ejected for it. I guess because of things that CJ Gardner-Johnson was saying to him. Now would be a little bit awkward between Anthony Miller and CJ Gardner-Johnson, don't you think?
Yeah. I think
hopefully, but they let bygones be bygones.
I think Chauncey, as his birth name, is known as a bit of a shit talker, a bit of a rabble-rouser, so would not surprise me.
Yeah, and then he was traded to the Philadelphia Eagles after just 3 years with the Saints, after extension talks broke down. Goes to the Super Bowl with the Eagles that year. They lose to Kansas City. Eagles let him walk. The Detroit Lions signed him to a 1-year deal, and early in the season, he tears his pectoral muscle, comes back, and eventually plays in the playoffs for the Detroit Lions, hits free agency again. Then the Eagles defense decided they had lost its edge in 2023. They re-signed CJ Gardner-Johnson to a 3-year, $27 million deal, although any contract that Howie Roseman signs, you can kind of take the initial reporting as kind of a fabricated number because there's not a whole lot of guaranteed money there. But then he is traded to the Houston Texans after winning the Super Bowl with the Eagles and playing every one of their games down the stretch. When asked why on a podcast, CJ Gardner-Johnson said, well, the Eagles traded me because they were scared of a competitor. Simple as that. He ends up on the Texans. Texans invested Kenyon Green, who's also now in the building, by the way, for the Ravens on their practice squad, and they invested draft assets in him. And yet they decided to move on from him after just 3 games. Jonas, after scouring social media and after reading Texans reports, what can you gather about what went wrong for CJ Gardner-Johnson in Houston?
Yeah, I mean, I saw this even before the Ravens were in the mix to get him. This was, after 3 games, they got rid of him, and the Texans reporter for ESPN tweeted out basically I think 2-minute breakdown of the kind of communication breakdowns that CJ was a part of, and it was not really all that, it was hard to defend, I guess, from the perspective from the ESPN report and from other reporting on him, just being the fall guy for a lot of crucial big plays where he's supposed to have one guy and the receiver splits in motion, and then they're just totally bamboozled about who's supposed to get who. And it looks like, one guy was responsible for him, but it was actually Chauncey Gardner-Johnson because he just left him completely out in the cold based off his own communication breakdown. So, D'Amico Ryans really didn't say a whole lot about the decision to get rid of him. He felt it was better for the team. He felt, things that turned around. And you look at these last 2 weeks, I mean, obviously it's not a huge accomplishment. Nothing should be beating your chest over to hold the Titans to 0 points and to completely shut down the Ravens. But this Texans defense did look better the past 2 weeks than did the first 3 weeks. And, I think there's obviously talent in, CJ Gardner-Johnson. I think he's a good run defender. I think he's still athletic. He's still pretty much in his athletic prime. But for him to come here amid everything, amid all the slings and arrows that are being aimed at Zach Orr, just, how many problems this defense already has, I don't know if they can stand to add another combustible element to this locker room. I mean, I think there are a lot of good guys in this locker room, but I don't think you want someone in there who's not going to just kind of keep his head low and learn the defense and do what he has to avoid suspicion. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting next couple of weeks.
Other teams have in the past, like the Eagles, decided that the juice was worth the squeeze in acquiring him. And obviously it has paid off for teams in the past, like the Eagles who won the Super Bowl with him. So Eric DeCosta must think that the juice is worth the squeeze. But when you sign a guy to the practice squad, you're not going to get a whole lot of juice out of that guy, especially since you just added Alohi Gilman and you already have two other safeties in there. Do you think CJ Gardner-Johnson is going to be active on game day just because of the amount of injuries that the Ravens defense has incurred?
I don't think so. At least for this one, I don't know if he plays a whole lot of special teams. I would guess probably not. And if you're a safety, then that is the only path to playing on this defense. If you're not getting over 50% of the defensive snaps, I mean, Sanusi Kane was active on Sunday, but the only snaps that he played, because Ruben Lowry was getting the start ahead of him, surprisingly, were the handful of special team snaps that he played. So you're not going to be active on game day if you're not expected to contribute in any meaningful way. Maybe the Ravens surprise us and they have some 4 safety sets that just leave us all wondering what exactly it is that they're doing. Obviously, CJ is, I think, considered a good run defender, which the Ravens probably need a lot more of. But it's just it's a lot to wonder. It's a lot to expect him to be able to contribute this early in a significant way, I think.
Yeah, and that's why our word of the day, by the way, is accountable. By the way, you have an ant on your microphone.
Hell yeah.
Or I think I killed him. Accountability, is our word of the day. And it means the state of being accountable, especially an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility or to account for one's actions. After the Texans game, Kyle Van Noy got up on the podium and said, I think we need to realize how accountable this defense is. And then when you asked to follow up, he said, I think we'll find out during this week about how accountable this defense is. I think to bring in somebody, even though he's on the practice squad, as I said a few days ago, the guys that are on the practice squad are still in the locker room. Interestingly enough, by the way, CJ Gardner-Johnson is placed in the same row, just a couple lockers down from Kyle Hamilton, not Alohi Gilman, even though those two were previously have a relationship. Thought that was interesting. Mm-hmm. On the field, on the practice field, the guys who are on the practice squad and could be elevated for game day. So they have an impact on the team. They impact the team's chemistry. I think it's interesting to bring in somebody who previously had been criticized for his accountability as recently as a few weeks ago with a different team, when this defense perhaps needs to be a little bit more accountable itself. Is this just worsening a problem? And rookie Malachi Starks spoke yesterday with the media. It's so difficult when he's literally a rookie who came from a winning program. He's a first-round pick, but he has never even never played on a good NFL defense before. So when he gets up there and talks about how he wants to help return this defense to what it had been, he wasn't a member of those 2023 or 2024 defenses. So I feel bad for the guy because he's put in a difficult situation to have to answer for his veteran teammates.
Yeah, and something else about Kai said, it was just accountability. Accountability to him is not just guys around the locker room being accountable and owning up to mistakes and explaining that they should have been somewhere that they weren't, but it's just guys looking at themselves in the mirror and recognizing that they might have erred in this way or that way. So, obviously these guys are not in the business of telling on themselves and explaining that they were the reason that a play busted or went horribly wrong. But, it's going to be interesting to see if anyone is able to make this leap from week 5 to week 6 after, being honest with themselves and reckoning with what might have gone wrong. There are plenty of mistakes by the Ravens defense on Sunday. Hopefully the coaches are putting them in position to succeed. Hopefully they're more knowledgeable about where they need to be. Obviously, we don't expect certain guys in this defense to be forced into the kind of roles that they were forced to on Sunday because of injuries. I'm thinking like Keon Martin, Ruben Lowry with Kyle Hamilton probably coming back, and Alohi Gilman now in there. But guys just have to be better. I don't know what else, what other way to put it. Just, if you're only getting 6 hours of sleep, it's time to jack it up to 8 hours. If you're only getting 4 hours of film study a week, it's time to, jack it up to 5 or 6. It's just, you need to do everything that you can, especially in a crucial position like this, where this might be the last game that Zach Orr is coordinating in Baltimore. You've got to do everything that you can to put this team in a position to succeed against a very, very good Rams offense.
Yeah, the Ravens have their backs against the wall. They're 1-4, one more game before the bye, facing the 3-2 Rams on Sunday. Currently, the Rams are favored by 7.5 points for a home game.
Low.
For a home game for the Ravens. Last time these two teams played, I believe it was the Tylan Wallace walk-off punt return on a rainy day, if I recall.
In overtime, no less.
In overtime. And I believe it's the forecast is calling for some rain as well. Will the rain be enough to stop the Rams offense from attacking this Ravens defense? That might be their only hope, because this Rams offense is incredible and has been with Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay at the helm. They are second in the NFL in yards per game. They are still just 15th in the NFL in points per game, but it really starts with their rushing attack, which you mentioned, Jonas. This team likes to go with 21 personnel, second in the NFL in rushing success rate. This team just lost Odafe Oweh. I know Odafe Oweh played for 45% of the snaps, which was a career low for him. I know the Ravens did not trust him in run defense, but you just took another body away from a run defense and from a defensive line that is in desperate need of bodies to clog up the works. How can this Ravens run defense possibly stop the Rams on the ground?
I think if I were the Ravens and it's the first quarter and you already have Kyren Williams ripping off 25-yard runs, that to me is a sign that you're in for a very, very long day, because this is a good Rams offense that's staying on schedule, but it's not a particularly explosive Rams offense. I think their longest runs this season have been on, misdirection and around Tapuka Nakua. You get him in space, but longest run for Kyren Williams this year, just 15 yards. Longest run for Blake Corum, who I believe went to St. Francis in Baltimore, just 20 yards. So they do a good job of just scheming up, the yards that they need to get to put Matthew Stafford in position to avoid third longs, where this offensive line can maybe be a little bit wobbly. Kyren Williams only 4.5 yards per carry this year. Blake Corum 5.5 on a much smaller sample size. But this is a Rams rushing game that likes to do a lot of the kind of runs that the Lions just completely, mollywopped the Ravens with in week 3. Just inside zone duo. We're going to double team your defensive tackles and get up on your linebackers and dare you to crash downhill, because either you're scared of our play action passing game or you just don't have the bodies to handle us inside. So it could be that this game, if you remember the start of that 2023 game against the Rams, I think the Rams get the ball first and they just move that ball with ruthless efficiency downfield. I think maybe only passing once. It was just like 5-yard run after 6-yard run after 7-yard run. And not until they got to the low red zone did they really run into trouble and have to settle for a field goal. But it's possible that with this Ravens defense being compromised, again, maybe still being committed to playing with relatively light boxes, that they just dare the Rams to do that again, over and over again. And if they do, it could just be, death by 1,000 cuts again.
Yeah, and they could control the time of possession. That even when the Ravens were going well, even in the first 3 quarters of the Bills game and against the Browns, and for the first half of the Lions game, the Ravens, one was partly probably due to the fact that their offense was so quick strike, but they really struggled to control time of possession. Yep. And that only makes your defense more tired. That only makes you more worn out and more likely to be taken advantage of. In the pass rush as well, I mean, that is probably where Odafe Oweh's absence is going to be felt the most. PFF had the Ravens as 27th against the pass and 29th against the run. Who is going to take his snaps? Tavius Robinson was already playing a career-high 70% of defensive snaps. By the way, he is, as much as the coaches talk up Tavius Robinson and as much as they appreciate what he does on the field, he is ranked 74th by PFF out of 109 edge rushers. Mike Green has been even worse, according to PFF, 107 out of 109. And he is being asked to do a lot as a rookie. And as we've said before, it's clear he's not ready for that. David Ajabo has also really struggled when he has been called upon. Adisa Isaac is still on IR. Who's going to take up the snaps that Odafe Oweh is leaving vacant? Kyle Van Noy is going to have to play, 65%, 70% of snaps?
Yeah, and you just hope that he is healthier this week than he was last week, and that he, obviously he's coming back from that hamstring injury, and it's a good sign that he was not listed in any way on the injury report yesterday. But obviously, he's 33. It's still asking a lot for a guy to be the warhorse up front. So, maybe you see some snaps for Trent Simpson out there. Obviously, Kyle Van Noy is not really an edge rusher, but could help out in those run fits, could be blitzing off the edge. They don't have a whole lot of options. It's just as simple as that. And so they're going to need to find a way to either sustain drives on offense or live with short but painful drives on defense, or otherwise this is just going to be another
just pick your poison.
Very, very painful fourth quarter where they're just, one team has had the upper hand all game, and it just starts to feel like you're climbing up a hill with a 40-degree incline.
Yeah, I wanted to give the Who's Got It Better Than award to Matthew Stafford this week because I think he leads the NFL in passing yards with 1,500 already through just 5 games. Why did you want to give it to Puka Nacua, Jonas?
Because he's exactly the kind of guy who's going to this is how low I am on the Ravens' chances of stopping Puka Nacua, and also just their general ugliness on offense. What are the odds that Puka Nacua finishes this game with more combined total yards of offense than the Ravens?
Oof. So we're including running and passing and receiving,
and maybe even passing,
and maybe even passing. I don't think they'll pull out those stops. He already has 588 receiving yards on 52 receptions. He's caught 52 of 62 passes thrown his way, by the way, and has 2 touchdowns. And then on the rushing side, I
think it's like 3 for 60.
Okay. I think it's highly possible. And we'll get into the Ravens' offensive struggles last week against the Texans. But the only way it's not, maybe, Jonas, or one way it's not, is if Puka Nacua doesn't play a whole lot of snaps in the fourth quarter because this game is in hand.
Yeah. I think just ballparking it with no scientific rigor, I was thinking like 15%, which is not as...
It's not zero.
It's definitely not zero. I just think, this Ravens defense has been bad all over the place, but especially over the middle of the field, in between the numbers, they've allowed 28 catches on 34 targets for 367 yards. Other teams have allowed more in that time, in that span over the first 5 weeks, but the Ravens are averaging a league worst 1.08 EPA per play on those throws in the intermediate portion of the field. So basically every single time a quarterback throws targeting a safety or targeting a linebacker, the Ravens are basically conceding a point. Yeah. That is terrible. And guess what Puka Nacua is doing over the middle, between the numbers, 5 to 15 yards downfield. 20 catches, 20 targets, 20 catches on 20 targets, 235 yards, 15 first downs, 1 touchdown. The yardage and the catches are all first in the NFL. So it's possible that with Kyle Hamilton, we think moving to the slot that will be a potential Puka deterrent, but he's just such a good receiver. I mean, he's got the most catches and yards over the first 5 games of an NFL season in NFL history. So we are talking about a record-breaking pace for a receiver who's going up against a record-breaking defense in all the worst ways. And if the Ravens don't have any kind of pass rush to bother Matthew Stafford, or they don't have any kind of run defense to keep the Rams out of positions where they could just be slicing and dicing the Ravens with play action passing. And by the way, Puka is a huge part of their rushing game as well, just of how good he is as a blocker. Then this could be a game where like Puka has a 99 PFF grade, just like the Isaiah Rodgers did for the Vikings a couple of years ago. I mean, he's just I don't know how many answers the Ravens have on defense unless Kyle Hamilton gets a disproportionate responsibility for covering him and is as good as he can be in stopping him.
When did Isaiah Rodgers have a 99 PFF grade?
When he had the fumble recovery for a touchdown, the interception
for
a touchdown.
Yeah, he had his hands on like 2 defensive touchdowns.
Yeah.
Well, if Puka Nacua doesn't kill you, at least Devontae Adams will. Remember when he posted that Edgar Allan Poe picture during free agency? Everybody thought
that was during the season. I think.
During the season. That's right, because they were talking about trading for him. Everybody thought he might be traded for.
And he got traded to the Jets.
Wasn't meant to be. All right, let's talk about the other side of the ball. Let's talk about Cooper Rush, who threw 3 interceptions last week. Not all 3 were his fault. One of them was targeted towards Rashad Bateman, who apologized yesterday for how it looked to Ravens fans. He said he did not give up on the football. He looked up, didn't see the football, looked down, looked back up, and it was too late. Ball ends up in the hands of a defender. Of course, there's the ball that bounces off the hands of Mark Andrews. Also not Cooper Rush's fault, but let's be honest, he didn't play great. Wasn't really buoyed by a great run game behind him. Derrick Henry rushed just 15 times for 33 yards. John Harbaugh said earlier in the week that everything would be on the table in terms of Player substitutions, player personnel changes along the offensive line included. Not a great sign that Ben Cleveland, who everybody in the fan bases wanted to see inserted into this offensive line, is on the shelf, apparently, as he was not out there in practice. Emory Jones Jr., I know he's a third-round rookie, but he is a full participant in practice. I think it still would be too early to throw Emory Jones Jr. into the mix on the offensive line.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be tough. I mean, as Kyle Van Noy pointed out after that Ravens loss on Sunday, like this Rams team is far from unbeatable. They lost to a 49ers team that was starting Mac Jones at quarterback, that had Kendrick Bourne as wide receiver 1. They weren't even getting a whole lot from Christian McCaffrey in the run game that night. Obviously, the Rams have had 10 days or so to prepare for this one because they played on that Thursday night. But they are gettable to a degree. I just don't know if this Ravens offense in the current state of the offensive line, of Cooper Rush not being a whole lot of a ceiling raiser or floor raiser, is going to be the guy to kind of get you to a point where you're scoring over the 21 points that you probably need to have a chance in this game.
Yeah, it really is not looking good. Rams are 10th in the NFL in yards per game allowed, 14th in points per game allowed. But as you said, Jonas, they are gettable. It's just a matter of, can they get them? To me, it's a tiny sample size, but I saw a slight connection, I guess you could say, between DeAndre Hopkins and Cooper Rush on Sunday. It's apparent that he likes to push the ball down the field, as you had pointed out before the game, Jonas. And maybe he has more of a connection with somebody who is a true X receiver, who's more of a jump ball artist. I mean, the ball that he threw to Rashad Bateman, maybe if DeAndre Hopkins is running that route, he might be able to pluck it out of the air. Is there any one weapon on this offense that you think could be Cooper Rush's best friend on Sunday?
Probably whoever is going up against Emmanuel Forbes. It's an evergreen answer. Obviously, not a lot of games where Zay Flowers could be going up against a cornerback who actually weighs less than him, but this might be.
Yeah, that's got to be the matchup, right? Flowers against Forbes.
I guess look at some of the snap distributions. Emmanuel Forbes isn't an every down cornerback because he has 2 cornerbacks ahead of him. Obviously, the Rams will be without Ahkello Witherspoon, who was their Week 1 starter, who's been banged up and has not been playing recently. Their other cornerbacks have graded up pretty well on PFF, despite a recent kind of dip in form. I mean, the Eagles went for 200 plus yards against them in Week 3, which by the Eagles standards might as well be 300 yards or so. Obviously, the 49ers tore them up last week. The Colts, I think, had a nice day against them. So there are some guys that you can pick on. Cam Curl is a really good safety, but this is going to be a game where you have to have probably 220 plus combined yards from your big 3 at wide receiver: Bateman, Flowers, D-Hop. Would be helpful for Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely to both step up. I just think that because of how strong this Rams defense is at defending the run, you're going to absolutely have to take your chances like Mac Jones did through the air. And I just don't know if he's anywhere close to Mac Jones in quality at this point.
We talked before the Houston game about the need for Todd Monken to throw some chaos elements and maybe some creativity, especially in the run game, into their game plan against the Texans. Did you see any of it?
I mean, Keaton Mitchell had a couple nice design runs where he's, getting the chance to get a bit of a running start onto the ball and work against the grain, but they just,
like the jet sweep type action. Yeah.
I think to allow more creativity, you need an offensive line that holds up. I mean, you're not going to run a flea flicker for a team that can't protect the pocket for 2.5 seconds. It's just as simple as that. I think probably the biggest canary in the coal mine of all this was I was just looking to see how elusive Kyron Williams was, because I thought I remembered him being a nice tackle breaker. Turns out that's not really the case, but all the way at the bottom of the PFF elusiveness ratings, all the way at the bottom of the missed tackle counter was Derrick Henry. And I think that's not an indictment of him as much as it is almost completely on the offensive line. We saw him make guys miss in the open field in that Week 1 game against Buffalo. I don't know if he's made a single guy miss in every game of that after that, because teams have just been stuffing the line, daring the Ravens to beat them over the top. He's getting no relief whatsoever in terms of clear, running lanes. We know he's not a make you miss guy in close quarters. He needs a runway. And this Rams defense, like I think they're 5th in the NFL in average yards before contact. So they're probably also going to come up the works as effectively as the Texans did and as the Lions did in weeks before. So if you have Derrick Henry on your fantasy team, maybe he comes through on a couple of goal line situations, but it's very, very tough for me seeing that this is going to be the week that this Ravens run game gets anything going.
Yeah, I mean, I opened TikTok the other day, Jonas. This is a terrible way to start this, but the number one thing that was on my suggested search bar, do you want to guess what it was?
Baseball.
Derrick Henry trade.
Oh,
yeah.
Why would they do that?
I know. Not a great thing to see there. It's all he needs is a lane. We saw that against the Lions where he rips off that great run. He is a home run hitter. All he needs is some kind of space, and he's been given absolutely none of it this year. And it's amazing that he's still been able to average 5 yards per carry so far, but I imagine that number is going to continue to go down, and the Ravens are going to have to run him. I mean, they're going to have to keep trying to give him opportunities, but unless the offensive line clears any kind of path for him, it's not going to be good.
Yeah.
All right, we are going to give you our predictions on the other side of another quick break.
For the 5th year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
Looking for the ultimate game day spot? Head to Guinness, Baltimore. We've got fresh pints, the biggest screen south of the stadium, and the perfect place to cheer on the home team. Game time is Guinness time.
All right, Jonas, let's give you our predictions, which you can also read on thebanner.com, or you can subscribe $1 for 6 months.
Shout out to the Banner.
Start with you, Jonas. What do you have the Ravens losing this game?
Yeah, I have the Rams winning 31-14. I just think that the Rams have a better offense than the Texans. I think they have a comparable defense. I think their pass rush is scary. Jared Verse, if both Ronnie Stanley and Roger Rosengarten are coming into this thing banged up, then he could have a very, very impactful game. They can rush from the inside as well, which I think is something that the Texans have lacked this season. So it's possible that Marlon plays. It's possible that Kyle Hamilton looks like his old self. It's possible that this offensive line finally gives Cooper Rush some of the time that he needs to conjure some of that Dallas Cowboys magic. But just beyond the Ravens having a potentially game-saving performance on special teams, which is obviously a huge concern for the Rams and a potential strength for the Ravens that they can leverage in this one. I just don't know how the Ravens are going to get a toehold in this game. So I'm going with Rams 31, Ravens 14, and then us having some very uncomfortable conversations about what comes next during the bye.
How about a wrinkle here, Jonas, on offense? Do you think we'll see any Tyler Huntley in the game on Sunday?
I don't think we'll see him inside the 20s. I think he could be an option, maybe on short yardage, scenarios. So I guess that could happen inside the 20s. But I just think he's a guy who you put in there in bespoke packages where you need a little bit of a run threat. Again, he's not anywhere close to, a Josh Allen or a Lamar Jackson as far as, creating something out of structure. I think he's one of the more worrisome stats about him that I think I saw was like his pressure to sack ratio is one of the worst in the NFL this year. And the one thing that the Ravens are giving up a lot of is pressures right now. And at least Cooper Rush will try to put the ball in a place where a wide receiver can make that. And if Tyler Huntley is just running around like a chicken with his head cut off, then you're going to run into trouble when it comes to sacks, strip sacks, just drives being knocked off course before they even have a chance to be successful. So maybe the Ravens, like what they saw from Tyler Huntley this week in practice. I think John Harbaugh mentioned on Friday that Huntley had a really nice week of practice with, not putting the ball on the ground once as a passer. I just think it's probably more likely than not that we see Cooper Rush being QB1. And, as Zay Flowers said on Wednesday, like, we believe in Coop. He didn't mention Tyler Huntley at all.
Yeah. What's Malik Cunningham up to?
I believe he was last helping the Detroit Lions prepare for the Ravens.
On their practice squad?
Yes, before that game.
Yeah, that's tough. I also have the Ravens losing this game. Similar margin of victory for the Rams, 35-17. I don't see it as particularly close for all of the reasons that we outlined as well. We didn't even get a chance to talk about Joe Flacco being traded to Cincinnati Bengals. We could see Flacco in Baltimore again on Thanksgiving night.
Unless that Bengals offensive line kills him first.
Jeez.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. It is October 9th. Shout out to everybody who's watching live on YouTube, X, or Facebook. Tony on YouTube said he is going to buy a Toyota and go to Guinness. Two massive decisions made.
I would not encourage you to consume Guinness while operating a Toyota.
Yeah, I wouldn't say at the same time.
No,
not at all. One is a big financial decision. One's a little bit smaller. But thanks for tuning in. Tony, thanks for tuning in anywhere that you are listening as well on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts. Write us a 5-star review, and I will read it out here on the show. So do it, please, for Jonas's sake, if no one else's. He's even wearing the Banner branded sweatshirt to keep the brand going. Thanks so much for tuning in. For Jonas Shaffer, I'm Paul Mancano.